Hey, welcome back. In this video, we're going to dive into some of the first commands. We'll open up the PowerShell and start typing some code. But first, I just want to dive into some of the key differences that you'll encounter if you're using a PC compared to using a Mac. So Macs and Linux operating systems, basically anything that isn't a PC, both happen to be based on something called Unix, which means that they share almost all of the same terminal commands. So if you have a Mac and another student is using a Linux machine, the commands that you'll use to make a new file or to make a new folder are the same. Unfortunately, that's not true on a PC. Instead, Windows has an entirely different kernel, which is, think of it as the thing it's based on top of. So Mac and Linux are based on Unix. Windows has its own kernel. And in the past, it's always had its own command line syntax, totally different commands for MS-DOS, if you've heard of that, and something called command prompt. Fortunately for us, there is an alternative called PowerShell. So PowerShell allows PC users to type Unix-like commands on a PC. So you don't have to have a Mac, you don't have to have a Linux machine to be able to use not exactly the same, but very similar commands to what I'm going to be using in this course and what all the other students will be using. Not to mention the fact that it's what most developers use as well. Unfortunately, PowerShell now ships with all modern Windows computers since Windows 7. So it didn't used to, which would have made this a little more tricky to install it, but nowadays your computer should have PowerShell automatically installed, bundled for free. All you have to do is open up, you have to start PowerShell, I'll show that in just a sec, and then we can start typing the commands. So this section is for PC users, but I have another section on commands for Mac and Linux users, and you'll see that things are very, very similar. There's just a couple of slight differences, so I did decide to break them into two different sections. But throughout the course, I will be using a Mac, but all the commands that I use, you'll be able to use on your computer if you are a PC user. But I figured it would be better to make a separate video or a separate series for PC users, just so that you can see what it looks like on your type of machine, rather than having to watch the whole course on a Mac. So as far as opening up the PowerShell, I'm not an expert Windows user, so I just come down here and click and type PowerShell, or power. And it pops up, and this is it. This is the PowerShell. Okay, so I can start typing commands right away. I can type gibberish, and I get an error back telling me I don't know what you're talking about. So that tells us there are only particular keywords that we can type. And one example I'll show you right now is the ls keyword. It stands for list. And it just shows the contents of the folder you're currently in. And you can see the path listed here. In the next video, we'll talk more about paths. But you can see it here that I am in a directory called Colt in the users directory in C drive. So if I type ls, it will show me the contents of that. So there's the desktop, documents, downloads, favorites, links, music, OneDrive, pictures, and so on. These are the contents of my user folder of the Colt directory on this PC. So what you see will probably be different. You might have some of the same stuff like desktop and documents and downloads, but you might have added or removed other directories here. So this is how we launch PowerShell, but I'll just contrast that with if you use the command prompts, which is kind of the Windows flavored thing. This is imitating Macs or a Linux machine. This is what you get on a PC. If I tried to type ls here, it tells me it's not recognized as a command. So that would make for a bad experience if you are following along in the course using the command prompt, unless you happen to know it already. But I will be using commands like ls on my Mac, so if you're using PowerShell, you can also use ls when I use it. Okay, so I'll end the video here. We just opened up PowerShell. We talked about what it is. It is an alternative to the built-in command prompt. It matches the syntax for the most part, not 100%, but very close to what I'll be using on my Mac. So it should make for a better experience for you to use. And it's also what most developers on PCs are using these days, unless they actually install their own Unix-based virtual machine, which is a whole other can of worms to open up. So for now, we're sticking to PowerShell. This is a Python course anyway, so the focus will be on Python. In just a couple videos, we'll be in Python land, fortunately.